You are watching the Pan-African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tafa. The Africa we want: unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 hashtag 1 million subscribers on the Pan-African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa. So, today is the day. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, dear Pan-African Daily TV fans and family and followers. Hotep. I said Hotep to you. Akwaba, like we say, and we say Injila Ani. You know, if it was morning and it's Southern Cameroon, because I come from that unique place. So we are going to say Mbafazi. Mbafazi means good evening to us, and Mbafana means that good morning to you out there in the diaspora. Now, I want to warm up the seat because today is a very unique occasion. And so while all of you are connecting and the whole team are connecting us to all the platforms that we're streaming live on, I would just use this minute and ask you to share this broadcast. It is very unique. We might not have chances like this anymore. Now, as you can see who is sitting with me here in the studio, I would like the diaspora to sit down before I actually ask him to teach us how to even pronounce his name. Because as you can see, we just adding one X part. We've been talking about the PLO Lumumba. We've been talking about Professor James Small. We've been talking about Professor Baina Bello. We've been talking about all the big brains and those that make noise, quality noise for the unification and the unity and the liberation of the African in the 21st century. So we are adding one more expert on this list today, whom you are going to discover. You know, I feel that's the only kind of persons when they sit in front of my stereo here, I shiver. Because, you're dealing with an expert, particularly in terms of media, right? And you don't know how it's going to look like. So I've been the couple of 1 hour trying to reassess how is it that I'm going to behave myself on the Pan-African Daily TV? Because when you have people that know, that have the know-how, like our elder, our brother, this son of Africa that is sitting here, you shiver. And that's the first time that this is happening to me, right? So I want to welcome all of you that are signing in on this special edition today, particularly Africans in the East, North, South, West, Central, in our diaspora. I want to welcome you to this special edition today. And first of all, let me just say why this program is switching. Because like yesterday, we talked about, we ought to have had Dr. Reverend Nina from the Caribbean or from Haiti to talk about the issues on Haiti. But then we do realize that we have to put an extra summit out here on the situation of our brothers and sisters in the Haiti. And so we're putting out that expert summit coming up in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Just watch out on it. And so we want to do a massive fundraising and also an awareness campaign on the issue that we see our brothers dying out there in the New York City or some kind of place. I don't want to call such names, right? And so we want to say enough is enough. But also we want to hold the Africa leadership accountable for just being mute at any time, for any reason. Not even one single voice is saying anything. So we want to say, what's up? What is going on, Africa? But tonight, like I said, I grew up listening to the radios in Cameroon, and I knew two unique voices that I would never miss the stories. And one of them is sitting right here in front of me. And I call his name Expert Ntumfoyn. Boh Herbert. I will have to teach you how to pronounce this name because that's a unique name that is going into the history of the Pan-African liberators of our time, particularly in the 21st century. So if you've known all the prominence and the experts in the past, know that we've just added one new expertise on our guest profile. Tonight, we want to talk about Black on Black neo-colonialism, and we want to use a special unique case of Southern Cameroon's Amazonia, whom they are celebrating their Independence Day come this Friday. So these 2 days, we're really going to focus on this because, like I said, and we've been saying here a couple of times, all the guests that are coming to talk about this Africa, if Africa is not at peace with itself, how can we talk about economic development? How can we talk about peace and unity when there is still war, when all these countries are still being chopped up? So the major question for these 2 days is, I already posted it. And if you've had our press release, you should know it offhand. Are we uniting or we are dividing? Is it possible that Africa can live in peace with one another when they break up these petty colonial boundaries in countries that they put like a patchwork countries, whether we fit or we don't fit? So are Africans going to redefine what the Africa that they want? We all know that we are the Abantus, that we are one unique people. But then we've had some kind of, mindset and culture that do not unite us as a people. So the question we should be asking in these 2 days, while the Amazonians are celebrating their Independence Day, is what is it that Africa should deal with? Go back to its indigenous ancient culture and history, or go forward and stay in this colonial agenda where we hit and kill one another? What is it that we want to know today? So I want to welcome you into this spacious studio and this edition with my brother sitting here, welcoming him to the studio. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
It is a wonderful pleasure, like I said before, to host someone like you, Ashiva, because I grew up knowing you not just like a media expert, but a senior correspondent on very strategic, a top, how can I say, high-end institution like the United Nations, and most of all, I mean, you'll be telling us about that. Now, what is it that we should be learning on this platform today with your experiences? What is it that you want to teach us today?
Well, teach would be a very big word. I would not use it, but I try to share a bit of knowledge and try to awaken our brains about some of the brainwashing that has been going on. Let's start right at the beginning. We live through a world where the Black person has gone through 900 years of slavery, Arab slavery and transatlantic slavery. And we now live in a time when people want us to believe that slavery was over, that it was abolished. I'm one of those who don't believe it. And I can show you how with just a few examples. Why were our people brought from Africa to the Caribbeans, to Latin America, to the United States? They came to grow cotton in Alabama. They came to grow sugarcane in Haiti. But what happened when they told us that we got independence? Well, the plantations, the cotton plantations, are in Niger and in Mali and in Chad and in Cameroon. So why do you need the slaves in Alabama anymore? The sugarcane plantations are in Konteng. They're all over Africa. Why do you need to ship the slaves here at such great expense and then have to deal with the rebellions in the plantations? So what happened was that they transferred the plantations and put new plantation managers in charge of the colonial enterprise, which was an extension of colonialism. So I'd like to touch on that a little bit. I'd like to touch on what is a global, I call it a global conspiracy against Africa. Correct. Whether you take the United Nations or you take the IMF or you take the World Bank, there is a global conspiracy against Africa, holding our people down to a certain level of underdevelopment. I'll give you one example. The West believes very well in, in free markets, capitalism, which is the raw end of it. But let's call it free markets. If you believe in free markets, you grow the private sector. You grow the individual, you invest in the individual, you allow the entrepreneurship to grow. What model did they pick for Africa? They picked a model that's absolutely cloned from communism, where the government is the central planner, the main economic partner, and the main mover and shaker of everything. And all the money goes to the government, from the IMF, from the World Bank, and they expect the private sector to grow in Africa. They expect the people of Africa, submitted to that tyranny and dictatorship, to be able to grow. That's why we find ourselves in a situation where you have Haitians, getting deported from the United States at this moment. And they showed up here, not out of their fault. They showed up here because the French in 1524 began a conquest of colonial enterprise, of colonial countries, territories, beginning with Haiti and others, that expanded the entire globe. And they never let off. When they let off from Haiti, they put in place a colonial tax for what they call, the price of our civilizing mission to you, brutes and savages. And the rest of the world knew it. The rest of the world let it happen. We saw under President Clinton in the United States, the government of the United States support the presidencies in Haiti after Baby Doc was taken out. But we know how well that went. We have a system today where they tell us that the purpose is to achieve democracy for Africa, but they will allow people in power like Mr. Biya to organize constitutional coups after another until there is a military takeover that kicks him out of power. And then they tell us, oh, there should not be a coup. No, there should be a coup every day. You have systems where the economic might of Africa, take a country like Ghana. Ghana has just struck oil. Well, they did so a little while back. But go check out how much percentage of that oil that is in Ghana belongs to Ghana. Correct. I shock you right now. They own less than a quarter of it. Okay? The rest of the money is getting out of Africa. If you remember the former president of Chad, Deby, he had to basically hold a gun to the head of the World Bank to change a contract that gave his country peanuts for the oil pipeline that delivered little to nothing to his country. And, and you have these institutions throw a tantrum when that happens. But the truth is that Africa has been encircled by a system that doesn't allow our people to breathe. Now, they told us there was independence. There was none. You can hear the United States today say, for instance, we don't like these cheap loans that China is extending to Africa. But for a long time, they didn't say anything when the French were extending cheap loans. Mm-hmm. For a long time, they didn't say anything when the cost of those loans was so exorbitant that there was nothing we could do, really. When the money really went through a revolving door, it came to Africa just so Mr. Biya can carry it in the next plane to Switzerland and turn it over to them. So our people got nothing from this deal. And so if you're thinking about, which is a theme that you mentioned, why Africa is breaking up, think about why Europe broke up. Mm-hmm. The Roman Empire broke up. Why the Soviet Union broke up? Because people are more united when they can define their own destiny.
Absolutely.
And big lumps of countries established by colonialists have pinned Africa to a position where it's going to be impossible to make our future. Take Nigeria. You got over 200 million people in a surface area that is perhaps the size of one state in the United States. How do you survive? That's going to explode. You can see the contradictions in Nigeria every day. The claims for self-determination in Biafra among the Yoruba people is not unfounded. All of that is linked to people having been lumped together by colonialists. And when they said colonialism was over, it was just so that they could cement it. It was to tell us, you have to accept it the way it is. But we fought for years. Our people picked up guns because they wanted to destroy colonialism. The end result was, you keep colonialism, you keep these boundaries, and you leave us in charge. And we will appoint one of yours who will henceforth be the colonial principal of this plantation, manager of this plantation, and we will continue to lord it over you. That's what we've got. And this is something we've got to resolve.
This is deep. And that's why I said I'm so happy that we're having you on this conversation. But could you just tell our viewers who you are and where you even come from?
Well, my name, I've got a title. The title is Ntumfoyn. Ntumfoyn means spokesperson for the Fon. The Fon is the traditional ruler of the people of Kom, and Kom is a kingdom in the northern parts of Amazonia. It is one of the bigger kingdoms up there. At the last count, which is never an accurate count because every demographic count in Africa has been about elections. At the last count, official figures, Kom is 240,000 people. It represents in geographic terms one of the administrative regions of, the so-called the Cameroons. My real names given by my father, Herbert, is the name he gave me from a priest who was in my village at the time, who was his friend. Boh is my last name. That's coming from my father. And I've been a journalist all my life. It is a vocation that I adore because it just helps us to speak truth to power. I worked at CRTV, which is Cameroon Radio Television, for a little bit. I worked on everything in politics as a sports editor. And then I worked for international media. I worked for the BBC as a correspondent, for the French news agency as a correspondent. Then I worked for the United Nations, essentially as a capacity building program manager in conflict regions across Africa, where we were making deals. And one of the projects that I was working on as a focal point was the moratorium on small arms and light weapons in West Africa. Then I came to the National Endowment for Democracy in Washington, where my job was really about helping the media support democracy across Africa. For a little while, for less than a year, I worked for Internews, which is a global agency based here in Washington that supports free media across the world. And my assignment with them was to go to Rwanda and help support the process of remaking the media sector. And then I worked 12 and a half years for the World Bank, as a senior communication officer, working in my last years as a communication advisor to the vice president for the Africa region, and generally to senior management there.
Maurice?
Maurice, I'm a spokesperson for Maurice. Maurice is the movement for the restoration of the independence of Southern Cameroons. It is what I've been doing since 2016. Maurice was established on a very simple basis. It was established on the basis that while there were very many groups that had established themselves to campaign for the independence of Southern Cameroons, this group didn't see the need for coming together under an umbrella. So we thought we should bring together not so much an umbrella as a secretariat service that will allow all of these movements to agree a common strategy and work together towards that. That's why one of the first things that Maurice put out was a plan that said, what do we do to get to independence? When do we declare it as restored? And how do we work on how to get there? And true to type and true to the fact that we were bringing together different kinds of expertise. There were groups that believed this is going to have to be done through partially through self-defense and an armed struggle. And they went ahead and played their own role. And we have essentially played a role in diplomacy, in advocacy, in making sure that information about what's going on in southern Cameroon is known to people, and that our history is known to people. And all of this cover-up that has been there for a long time, that we pull the blind over it right now and let the sunshine, show the truth to everyone.
Respect. Too much respect, sir. We came up with the theme with this slogan for the Independence Day, generally for independence or nothing, not less, no more. Let's go. And from the statistics, we're seeing that the Southern Cameroon, Sambazonia, is celebrating their Independence Day on the 1st of October. So what is this all about? Like, you're just going to tell us exactly, like you said, the free media and educating our people about this whole process. We still have a lot of a team that is coming up tomorrow to focus on the historical aspect and also why the need now, and also the organizers of this Independence Worldwide Day celebration, particularly the team in Germany that would be hosting for this year. So what is it? I watched your interview on one of the major news. I don't want to call some names here, and you inspire me to come up, or our team to come up with this. We went through the whole interview today, and it just came up that you kept saying we're settling for nothing less independence, total independence. So what about that?
Well, it's as if I showed up at this program and asked you, Dr. Susan Tafa, you are no longer Dr. Susan Tafa. From today on, you're going to be Dr. I don't know, Zeimana, which is a Rwandan name that means believe in God. The common equivalent is Visambam, which is my name. So every time I went to Rwanda and Burundi, I would introduce myself as Zeimana, so I would be close to the local people. But someone has showed up and has told the people of Southern Cameroon that whatever happened to you, you've got to believe it never happened. They have told us that if there was a UN resolution that granted you independence, just believe it did not happen. But that's not true, because there was never a resolution granting, the eastern province of the southern region independence. Mm-hmm. There was one for the people of Southern Cameroon. And they are asking us, oh, forget, it did not happen. If it happened, you really don't have a right to it. Then who has a right? Every country, to be able to claim independence, has had to rely on a resolution of the United Nations exactly equivalent to our resolution. At least every country that emerged after the United Nations was established. And so they can show up today and tell us, hey, forget, the resolution did not exist, because that's what they're seeking to do. And that's why we are saying, and for the people of Ambazonia, for the people of Southern Cameroon, this is a very, very important moment. And it is important for more than one reason, because the instruments for denying you independence have been at two levels. One has been brainwashing, on educating our people, getting them to understand that what happened did not happen, and then teaching a history that does not exist, or refusing to teach that history. That's part of the reason why our French-speaking brothers from across the border don't know anything about the history. They don't understand where we came from, how we got there. So that has been very intentional. That's been one instrument. The second instrument has been the instrument of violence. And that violence, as I insist, existed in peacetime. It exists when there is so-called stability and peace. Because people have been killed in Southern Cameroon. There have been martyrs who believed in this independence. The people like Augustin Gomjoa, they didn't go to their graves, called by God. They were sent there by some demons. They killed them because they did not want to let off, because they were not ready to give up. People like Albert Mukong got their lives shot cut short because they had to go through jail. People like Fongoji Dinka, who lives in London now, has to live there because he can't live elsewhere. You've got all the heroes of this struggle who face violence of different levels. And that violence was growing steadily. There were always massacres, of course. There were the massacres in Tombel. There were massacres in Bamenda. People were shot on a regular basis. When you asked to launch a political party in Bamenda, they shot people dead and told you that it was out of a stampede. So they kill people on a permanent basis. Growing up in Ginicom, which is the home of Augustine Gomjoa, I know of Sunday mornings when we were going to mass, when all of Ginicom was blacked out by the military sent by Ahijo that spent the night in coffee farms, arresting old men and taking them away to the BMM. So that violence has always existed and people have been killed. But they just stepped up the violence in 2016 and 2017 when Mr. Biya decided, with the approval of President Emmanuel Macron of France, who is really the colonialist here, Mr. Biya just being the proxy, when they decided to step up that violence into a war. And right now, as we speak, they have stepped it up into a violence that knows no discrimination. As we speak, they have ring-fenced places like Ngokutundra and Mbui because they are going after people they believe they should kill. And in the process, the civilian population is not being spared. You have footage of young children as young as 3 with bullet wounds on them because the troops are firing indiscriminately. They are burning down homes right now. So to the people of Ambazonia, as you prepare to celebrate your 60th anniversary in 48 hours, let me tell you something that comes from a song in 1971. Your revolution will not be televised. You must be part of this revolution. This is the moment, if you believe in Southern Cameroons, if you believe that General Field Marshal No Pity, if you believe that everyone who picked up a gun did so in defense of your liberty, that if they win victory, you will be in a better place. This is the time for you to fight for them. This is not the time to allow those who picked up guns, who are working as self-defense volunteers, to face the military of Mr. Biya alone. Our people need to rise up. Don't be frightened by the fact that they have guns. I'll make no secret of the fact that there's going to be sacrifice. And I tell people very clearly, if God did not know the value of sacrifice, he would not put Jesus Christ on the cross. There is a value for sacrifice. And our people will not get what they want unless they're willing to commit the sacrifice, which in many ways means what? The troops that have encircled Ngokutunja now should come under attack from other Ambazonian troops coming in from behind and coming from other territories. Mr. Biya's army should be made to fight this war on 1,000 fronts because there should be an uprising everywhere in Ambazonia. If you believe that because you're not holding a gun, this is not your war, you're completely mistaken. Because the likelihood that they kill any one of the guys with a gun is very slim. The only people these cowards are killing are those of you without guns. And there's no place where a revolution was won by the few with arms in their hands. A revolution is won when a people rise up as one, work together as one, supported by those with arms in their hands to take down a dictatorship and a tyranny. And that is what the people of Ambazonia must do. So on the 6th, no better way to celebrate than to take on the enemy, than to demonstrate to the world that the people of Ambazonia will not take this, not in this century, not ever.
People who are following the situation in Cameroon, I mean, from the diaspora, particularly our indigenous diasporans, and also on the continent, they threw out some questions like, but they thought, and they saw a national dialogue. And the government keeps saying they're doing everything to restore peace. and they saw even some commissions, and there were even some pictures rallying on the social media, which they posted to us. We got this from Israel, that one person said, but why should Southern Cameroons claim this when the government is doing everything to bring peace? Could you just answer them that question?
Well,
Has there been a dialogue? Has there been anywhere like there is something to sit and negotiate or even just address it?
if I showed up in this studio and the first thing that I did was kick Dr. Susan Tafa out of the studio, beat her up and tell her that I own the studio, okay, beat up the cameraman, beat up the production team and throw them out of the place, and then tell the world that, I'm going to make peace with Dr. Tafa. Never mind, I'm going to give her special status. She can sit on another chair, she can be anchor, maybe when I'm absent. But, I'm making sure that she can be peaceful. We can work this out. Then they want Dr. Tafa to accept that. That's what they're asking the people of Ambazonia to do. They're telling the people of Ambazonia that I showed up in your house, kick your butt, told you don't own it, took it over, and then now I just want you to accept it, and that's the way to make peace. This is the peace of the conqueror. This is not peace. Peace does not exist without justice. And so justice will only exist if, in the scenario that I was taking, in the analogy that I was taking, Dr. Tafa was returned to her full ownership of her show, of her whole ownership of her anchor person's chair, and in control of her studio. There's no other way in which I can bring peace without restoring that justice. And what they have told the people of Ambazonia is that, don't think about justice. Just think about normal life. Normal life is when we go around with the guns and the rest of you just tell us, yes, sir, yes, sir. This is what is the abnormal life is when we go around with the guns, and you too have guns, and you can kill us, and we can bring an armored car and you can take it down, and we can move full loads of armored cars into Ngokutunja, and 5 days after we can't even show a grasshopper that we killed. No, this is their full embarrassment. To know that the slaves rose up, that the slaves said, we will not accept this anymore. And so they're going around and telling everyone around the world, like Mr. Mbela was saying on the floor of the United Nations the other day, speaking on behalf of the political deadwood that's called Paul Biya, he said, we're doing everything to bring these people special status. We don't need special status. Nobody can give us special status. The United Nations gave us independence, not special status. If the United Nations wanted to give us special status, they would have given us special status. Do they know who got special status? The people of Zanzibar got special status. That is why the president of Tanzania, when he comes from the mainland, the vice president always comes from the island of Zanzibar. That is why the current president, Madame Hassan, succeeded after the former president died. She's coming from Zanzibar, from the island nation that didn't get independence, but agreed with Mwalimu Julius Nyerere that we will get into a deal in which we have special status. And under that special status arrangement, President Hassan, coming from Zanzibar, knew that she needed to make her vice president come from the mainland. Nigeria has got some kind of special status on, who runs for president next. You've got this rotating thing where it goes from up to south. We don't need that. When we're an independent country, we don't need it. It's like if you showed up in the United States, so the United States, just to take another example, this is a country that was pulled together from the beginning by 13 free colonies. Free colonies means independent colonies, very short. Okay, but they pulled together to form a United States under a deal that was very clear. That deal is maintained until today, and that's the reason why this country holds together. The other states that joined, up to 50 today, they joined under those arrangements. And there's only one state in the United States the state of Texas, that had a special exception, which is the possibility for them to withdraw from the union without it being considered a violation of the union agreement. Okay, so, but that is not special status to us. I can tell you people who have special status in the United States. Puerto Rico. The people of Puerto Rico, they were a United Nations trusteeship territory. They have not been integrated into a state. They have campaigns in Puerto Rico to become an independent country. They are free to do that. The United States, very powerful United States, can show up in Puerto Rico and tell them you cannot do that. And even in places where they did not have independence from the beginning. In England, you know, Ireland can say we're going to be independent. Scotland can say we're going to be independent. You know, there are marches all over. In Spain, Catalonia can say we're going to be independent. That's why Eritrea was able to extricate itself from an arrangement in Ethiopia that they did not agree with. And that's why potentially the de facto state of Tigray in the northern part of Ethiopia, where the government thought they could crush them by war, may emerge as the new country in the middle of Ethiopia if they don't take time. That is why Somaliland does not have to dispute whether it got independence or not. Yes, it got independence. Yes, it agreed that it was going to lump itself together with the rest of Somalia. And that's, you know, and that happened only 7 days after they had won international recognition. But when they did it, it is the parliament in Somaliland that voted for integration. When it happened to us, it was the colonialists deciding that they were going to attach them, they were going to attach us to them. But even then, even today, and in the midst of all the recognition and the stability that you have in Somaliland, the stable country that has been established with the capital Hargeisa, we are 30 years since they declared their independence restored. And the international community is still in that conspiracy. How can we recognize them? But they were quick to recognize Kosovo. They were quick to recognize breakaway republics from the Soviet Union. They were quick to recognize East Timor when it broke away from Indonesia. But how dare them recognize this guys breaking out of one of their properties in Africa? How could they do that?
It is sad, but it is very, very positive listening to you speak. Why I'm saying so, we've been talking of the systematic colonial black on black. Now, another question that just came in: what can you say, or what can you advise, or what can you just educate the people? Are the people, the commons, that are not in the government process, for instance, in the Republic of Cameroon, also are partisans, or like the Southern Cameroons are agitating, the people are also saying, we are one and indivisible, as they say, and so this should not happen? Have we seen that kind of uprising from the brothers of the east of Mongo say, no, we want to be one, or it's just the government?
No, again, we talked a bit about the brainwashing.
Yes.
The brainwashing is to the point where they don't even believe the history, because everybody has told them that it's not true. Everybody has told them that all of these Amazonian people, they're terrorists, they're bandits. It's to the point where you have members of parliament in France, someone like Sébastien Nadeau, going out on Twitter and calling Amazonian freedom fighters, calling them armed criminals. I mean, he must be cuckoo, because, you know, armed criminals are the Nazis that took over France. Those are armed criminals, not the French who fought to kick out the Nazis. Armed criminals are the French who picked up arms in 1954 to fight a war against the independence of Algeria, in which they killed over 1 million people. Those are armed criminals. Armed criminals are the French who took up a war against the Bassa and the Bamileke people, which officially killed 800,000 people. They killed 800,000 in Madagascar as well because they wanted to prevent those people from becoming independent. They killed hundreds of thousands in Haiti because they wanted to prevent them from becoming independent. And, you know, French presidents after French presidents have showed up and tried to get the world to understand that, you know, this was a mistake. The latest one is Emmanuel Macron. President Emmanuel Macron in 2019, speaking from Cote d'Ivoire, besides Alassane Ouattara, who only got to government because French troops, aided by American support, went into the presidential palace and took Gbagbo out of power and then installed Ouattara as their president, as their puppet. He was standing there in December of 2019 and he's saying colonization was a mistake. No, it was not a mistake. You don't make a mistake for 500 years. French colonization began in 1524. It is not a mistake when it stretches out for 500 years. By 1915, the French were governing over 100 million people that had nothing to do with French. Nothing. So it was not a mistake. When Emmanuel Macron went to Kigali, Rwanda, in March of this year, and went to the genocide memorial, his speech from there was, you know, we were blind as the genocide was being prepared. No, the French were not blind. The French were in bed with the Interamwe, the Hutu Interamwe that perpetrated the genocide. They were funding the regime as they are funding Mr. Biya's regime now. Only 10 days ago, the French signed new military agreements with La République du Cameroon to furnish them with more weapons, more deadly weapons, so they can go kill Ambazonians. So it's not being blind. It is a part of a system. And that system has taught Francophones, who are the most retarded of Africans, I believe, in sense of getting to emancipation. They have taught them that what the French want is exactly what you should accept for yourself. That is why the countries at the bottom of performance, economic performance, governance performance across Africa, private sector development, are all from former French-speaking colonies. Because they have put in place a system where they have managed to impose their own currency. By the way, in 2019, in December, when I was referring to Emmanuel Macron being in Abidjan, he was there to tell them, hey, you know what? I've heard your complaint against 75 years of dominance by a French currency that we put in place called the CFA. So I have come here to change all of that. And what did he change it with? He changed it with a change of name. He called it ECHO this time. So it's exactly the same thing as I showing up in your studio and saying from today, Dr. Tata, you're going to be called Dr. Zeimana. And you're just supposed to accept, and you're also supposed to accept that Zeimana is different from Dr. Tata. That's what the French have told their Francophone colonies. And they have submitted gladly. Because every one of them has never questioned the agreement that was signed in 1958 between General de Gaulle and these colonies. Because General de Gaulle did not want to grant anyone independence. He wanted them to get what he called independence within the French community. That is why people like Mr. Biya carry a French passport. They went to school as French people. There's no other way in which Mr. Biya is not French, because there's no way he could have traveled with a Cameroonian passport at the time that Cameroon was not a country, an independent country. That's how Mongo Betty was French, because you had to have a French passport. And to understand the extent to which these people treated us like subhumans, if you then say that this territory is your territory, French territory, then the Africans born in that territory should have had French nationality. They should have had British nationality. But that is not something they extend to those that are considered to be monkeys and animals. So this is a system that the world today, including with the United Nations, is trying to get all of us to forget, to move on, to believe it's over. They won't talk about reparations. When something like George Floyd happens in the United States, all of a sudden, people in France, for instance, forget that Adama Traoré also happened in France. People forget. And they forget because it is convenient to forget, because they have been taught to forget. Because the French have never allowed any space for anyone to do anything. When the Algerians were fighting for their independence, there were lots of Algerians who used to support the French, who supported them during the war, who were enablers, and the French had helped to move to Paris, among other towns. And in 1961, a year before Algeria got independence, when thousands of these Algerians who had done everything to support the French system, when they showed up to say that the people of Algeria deserve independence, French troops opened fire on them, killing 300 of them. Many of them were thrown into the Seine River, where they drowned. When the legions that returned to Senegal from fighting for the liberation of France from Nazi occupation, when they returned to Senegal and they started asking for independence for Senegal, the French executed 300 plus of them just like that. Because how dare you ask for independence? Now, the people of Africa must very purposefully ask from the French, from the British, from the Germans, from the Portuguese, from this. We must ask and insist not only that they apologize for all of these crimes, but that they prepare to pay reparations for these crimes.
Correct.
That they make up for these crimes. It is an important part of the process of establishing justice and reconciliation. And it is the only way that these nations will be freed of the guilt of the crimes that they have committed. Because if these nations were individuals, they will be burning in hell even while alive for the crimes they have committed.
Leo Wright, our very one of the regular members or followers and fans and supporters on the Pan-African Daily, is asking a question in the chat like, do you think, if we take the example of Brexit that just occurred, that's a recent one, and they had to negotiate, do you think that Africa could get to that stage where instead of killing one another to break up, they could really sit down to negotiate? And if that's the question, does it mean that knowing our history could actually identify us as a one people to sit and actually break up like a marriage in a very amicable way?
No, the system that's been put in place does not allow the people of Africa to have that same conversation. Mm-hmm. It does not. You know, the people who want independence for Scotland could go out and demonstrate in Edinburgh the other day. You know, they could do that. They didn't face the guns of Mr. Biya. Mm-hmm. The people of Ambazonia dare not go out on the 1st of October. I mean, when they go out on the 1st of October, because I know they dare everything, and I congratulate them for that. But when they go out on the 1st of October, every one of them is going to be prepared, because they know that opposite, the only thing they know is violence. And these people are going to show up with guns to kill them. So the negotiation part has been taken away from the table. Now, obviously, it's Mr. Biya's fault and Mr. Emmanuel Macron's fault to have declared war against Ambazonia. But it is the fault of the rest of the world that Mr. Macron and Mr. Biya can pursue that war. 20,000 lives after, 70,000 disappeared, injured people after, 2.5 million people displaced after, 4 years after. It is the fault of the rest of the world that they cannot call Mr. Biya to order. And what stops that from happening? What stops that is geopolitical interest. The United States, where I live, knows very well the crimes committed by the French, whether it's in Haiti or in Cameroon right now. Mm-hmm. But they are not calling them out on that. the alliance between the two is so important. It is so important that even when it is in the economic interest of the United States to make a nuclear deal with Australia, they have to find a way of placating the fabricated outrage of the president of France, who was looking to sell outdated technology to Australia and was infuriated by the fact that the United States went ahead and did it. These are the same people who while preventing everyone else, preventing Pakistan from getting to nuclear weapons, preventing Iran from getting to nuclear weapons. When the French developed their nuclear capacity, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was already in place. But the French refused to endorse the treaty until they had bombed the Sahara full of nuclear waste and had enough weapons to be able to put in place a nuclear bomb. That's the only time that they signed on. So this is a system where they have established, let me talk about negotiation. So there's a whole list of people and organizations and countries that endorse the negotiations between Ambazonia and La République du Cameroon. Those people include the European Union, the African Union, the Commonwealth of Nations, the United Nations, the United Kingdom, Canada, the United States. Now, if we limit ourselves to those 7, do you really believe that Mr. Biya has the wherewithal to resist pressure from these people to make sure that they can get to the table of negotiation? Do you believe that if the government of the United States were to tell Mr. Biya that you must get to the table of negotiations right now, Mr. Biya will be able to hold out? We know how they have dealt before. When they were okay with an apartheid regime in South Africa, they let them kill as many black people there as possible. They didn't care. But when it was time to shut down the apartheid regime, they also understood how to proceed. Now, when everyone was okay for the Soviet Union to dominate the Eastern European nations, they allowed it to proceed. But when it was time, when all of the revolution broke out in Eastern Europe, and they knew that it was time to let stuff go, you had Reagan in the United States say, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. They can say that to Mr. Biya today. They can say that to Mr. Macron. For proof, they're saying it to China. They're telling the Chinese, you cannot give these people too many loans because you're going to end up owning their countries. And we have delicate situations in places like Zambia, where there's so much Chinese loans, in places like, even places like Kenya, where there's so much investment in places like the port that, it's basically the property of the Chinese. But why is it bad when it is the Chinese who are doing it, and it is not bad when it is one of the Western Alliance countries that's doing it? The people of Africa are going to have to hold the feet of everyone to the fire to make sure that if it is about justice that we speak, it is justice for all human beings, agreeing that we are all the same. We are all coming from God, made in his image. And that's why I started off by saying that they keep telling the people of Africa that slavery is over. It's not. It's right here. People are still getting paid slave wages right now on which they cannot live. And today, the Congress of the United States is fighting to be able to make these people have a decent life. And they're facing opposition from corporations that are funding politicians to prevent people from emerging, to prevent people from having a decent life. That's what's going on. So I'm not just speaking about what's going on with Africa. I'm speaking about a world system that Africans are going to have to understand, and understand a way of getting around to preventing it. And there are many ways. I give you one small example, and I stop here. One small example is, you've got, just take gold production in Africa. Ghana has shot up. It is now the world, the leading gold producer on the continent. At an average, Ghana produces about 120 metric tons of gold a year. Okay, they've beaten South Africa to 150 metric tons of gold a year. They've beaten South Africa, which is about 118 metric tons. Okay, but how much gold reserve does Ghana have? On average, Ghana has about 8 metric tons of gold reserve. Now, why is gold reserve? Well, are gold reserves important? Gold reserves are important because they allow you to have a strong economy and a strong currency. So the cedi could be backed up by gold produced by Ghana if it were held in Ghanaian reserves, but that gold is sold out immediately for survival purposes. And so it makes the cedi, what can you call it? You know, some currency nobody wants to see. When I'm in Accra, you know, someone is willing to accept the dollar, the US dollar, quicker than to accept the cedi. So even when you're in Congo, in Kinshasa, you want to buy roasted plantain at the port of Kinshasa, you know, you're going to find a lady roasting plantains who wants US dollars, not Congolese francs. The reason we have that is because countries have decided we are not going to uphold our own system. And they have found themselves out of necessity, out of the system that has been put in place, out of the system that allows Ghana to own only a quarter of its oil, to immediately sell its own gold so that it can buy enough food for the people of Ghana, so that it can buy enough weapons to provide security for the people of Ghana. That example repeats itself across the continent. And so you find yourself in a situation where even a place like Mali, which is number 3 in gold production on the continent right now, or Burkina Faso, number 4, these are all countries that could use their gold reserves to show up their own currency. But even if they kept that gold, in the case of Ghana, they will be backing up their cedi. But in the case of Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger or Sudan, who are next in line, okay, Sudan in this case will also be backing up the Sudanese pound, which is a national currency. But if Burkina Faso and Mali wanted to do that, they'll be backing up the ECO, which is a French currency. So it is a system in which Africa has been essentially locked out. I told you I work for the World Bank and the IMF, and they're important pillars in how the world develops. But when the IMF and the World Bank were put together at Bretton Woods, no African country was independent. None. So because we were not at the table, we were on the menu. And they're still feasting on us today because we don't still have a say. Those who have a say, like China, get to the point where you have the scandals that the World Bank and the IMF are facing right now, where they were trying to doctor data to make sure that China looks good in the doing business report. So that's the system that's in place that has locked the African continent and the African people out of any system of equity.
Systematically made, not a coincidence, not accidental. Why is the African history so important? Like we have Professor James Small says, know your history, it will erase the white mystery. And now we see a system in which, like you said, I mean, 500 for 5 decades now, our educational system has been taught in a system that we know even the West, not even us. I mean, you see from the records, like we say, look at the refugee and leaving, African migrants dying at sea to come to Europe. They don't even know, most of us know about Africa out of Africa, right? And so what is it that would take us? I mean, we're just in the awakening, but this is not even the first awakening. Yes, we've had this. What is it that we should know now? What are the baby steps that Africa, like you're saying, has to start putting? Should we use the Amazonian model now to say we have to gang up right? And like you said, hold each nation underfoot. Number two, you are not just only a scholar with expertise and experience. You're not just a son of Africa, like we refer you, but you're a son of, knowledgeable about the world in terms of finance, in terms of politics, in terms of culture, in terms of spirituality. But you are most of all an activist. You have been seen on the street, starting from Cameroon to the United States where you're sitting with your banner, with the microphones on the streets in front of thousands of people advocating for this agenda, for the Africa that we want, particularly the liberation of Amazonia. Now, what is it that we want to multiply you into the young people on the continent? We want the Bohs everywhere. How can we do that?
First, I'm flattered that you say that. But everything I've done, I have learned from other people. There are giants that went before us. When I talk about Ngomjua, I was a little boy walking around in Jinicum, and we would go by and see him playing games with the old people. He had come back from Boya, disgraced by Madu Ahijo, when he decided that by presidential decree he was going to take off an elected prime minister and put in place someone he wanted to use, which was Solomon Tande Muna. And Joa had come back home and was a regular guy, a regular dad in the village. And we went around and we would come up to his 504 Peugeot, black 504, and try to see our face in that car and say, this is the prime minister and that stuff. So we looked up to this guy. When I started working as a journalist, some of the first people that I met were people like Albert Mukong. And Albert Mukong was willing to go to his grave with nothing on his back, not even a shirt, because he wanted to uphold the dignity of our people. We've known people like Kevin Gumne, who were willing to do anything. I had the pleasure of walking into the club in Boya and meeting someone like Chief Justice Endele. And the inspiration of sitting there at the club and hearing what they said, hearing the kinds of cross-fertilization of minds that was going on there in the clubs, because they were passing on traditions, they were handing down things. At one point when I was political affairs editor at CRTV and they put me on suspension from broadcasting, I went to Boya, or I went to the archives at the radio house in Yaoundé. And the only thing I did was listen to political speeches. I came to Boya to listen to Joa speak to Parliament of Southern Cameroon. Amazing audio of people who really absolutely believed everything, the fiber, and who did everything to raise a different kind of nation. That is why they were so admired by someone like Kwame Nkrumah, who paid a visit to Southern Cameroons, because he already knew that this was the model. This was, after all, the first place in Africa where the first democratic elections held, where there was transition between the ruling party that had organized the elections and had lost those elections, passing on power peacefully to the opposition, which has won. I like to recall that in January of this year, the United States was unable to do a peaceful transition of power. They had to have an insurrection on Capitol Hill. So Amazonia was doing that in 1954. That's why it was so inspiring. And that is why our people know exactly what they have left behind. They know exactly how the police force worked. They know exactly how the justice system worked. That is why even Francophones used to tell you that if you went to Bamenda and you played around, you went to Boya and you played around, the guy was going to take you to court because it was rule of law. They knew it. This is what they're asking us to turn our backs on. When we grew up, we knew when mail arrived in Jinicom every Tuesday and Thursday. We knew when that Land Rover would roll into Jinicom, and we knew where mail was delivered. You could post a letter from Jinicom to anywhere in the world. You can't post a letter today in today's Cameroon. Mail was delivered in homes in places like Tiko and Boya and Long Street in Boya, in GRAs in Bamenda and in Boya, at Bota. That mail was hand delivered There were trains that ran in southern Cameroon. There were plane services that ran. This government, these colonialists, they can run a pipe-borne water project, even when it has been fully funded by the international community. They cannot keep a market clean. They can't build a gutter to just let rainwater go by. So this is the system that has completely uneducated our people. And so when you talked at the beginning about the need to catch up on our history, it is an important need. It is an important need, and it comes with the boldness of being willing to speak the truth. If you listen to a clip of Reverend Father Tata Humphrey, which aired on CRTV, where he was saying, it's very clear what we agreed to. It is very clear what we wanted to do with these teachers. We did not do it. And we need to speak the truth to each other. And we need to face up to the need for justice. I felt so proud of Reverend Father Tata Humphrey. But at the same time, I felt completely disillusioned by what's happening with the top leadership of the Catholic Church and other churches in Ambazonia, who should be speaking up. That is what Christ would be doing if he was here right now. That's what he commands us to do, that we should speak truth to power. And I know there's great risk for the bishops, for everyone, because no one is beyond the reach of the Bia killers. No one. Yet, we must say that when the Joas did it, they knew that they could be killed. When the Endeles did it, they knew they could be killed. When the Mukongs did it, they knew they could be killed. When Frundi did it in 1990, at that time when he was could still hold his head high, he knew he could be killed. When the Mukongs did it, when Father Humphrey Tata does it today, he knows he can be killed. But a man must die for something. A man must die for some reason. And so we must have the courage to say that our children deserve to be taught the history, both of the betrayals of the Munas and the others, but also of the bravery and the heroism of the Joas, of the General Ivan Bart, and of the Field Marshal Nopiti, and all the others. That bravery deserves to be taught. Our people need to know it, and they need to know why these people are fighting. Because if they know it, then they know where they're coming from. Then they can determine where they're going. When they put you in a world where basically they cancel your history, they cancel who you are, they remake you in the image of another person, because that was the whole process of the French colonizing system. The purpose was to make you a French citizen. Mm-hmm. That's what Houphouët-Boigny became as president of Côte d'Ivoire. That's what Senghor became as president of Senegal. They were French people represented in the French assembly. And that is why Mr. Biya came up with assimilation, first with national integration. They integrated us because we were strangers. You don't integrate something that belongs. We were strangers. That's why they needed foreigners. They needed to integrate us. In fact, they called us the enemy within, and they called us the Biafra. So they needed to integrate the Biafrans. And then when they thought they had done the integration, then they needed to assimilate us, which was the same thing as the French, which is making you French. That's why they moved the French teachers to the English-speaking part. That is why the secondary technical school in my village, in my mother's village in Balikumato, is called the CES for the French acronym. It's not called anything. That's why the Ayaba Hotel has a name written in French. That is why they move magistrates into the court. And when Southern Cameroonian lawyers go to make a case before these magistrates and judges, they have to determine, are we going to get our case heard because this guy doesn't hear a word of English? Or are we just going to pretend that we are speaking English and then we will end up by putting our client in jail? So you find them, all of them, struggling to speak French because that system has so corrupted them that it has not allowed a possibility for these people to make an honest living without having to go around and find something else. So I think the Ambazonian model, when you go back to Southern Cameroons in the 1950s, to that transition in democracy, to the admiration that we saw from someone like Kwame Nkrumah, when you go back to that and you think about what today is, because what is happening today only happened in 1776, when the United States found the courage to kick the British out. That is as much courage as it takes to take a rubber gun and start a fight with a giant, with Goliath, determined to continue to go forward. And as in the case of David versus Goliath, don't forget that at the very beginning of that fight between David and Goliath, the army commanders went up to David and said, look, we're going to give you the best armor. We're going to give you the best swords. And they tried to fit David into those protective gear and give him a big sword so he could go out and kill Goliath. But David had to drop that sword because David was not fighting by his power. Because when you fight for the truth and fight for justice. You don't fight by your power. And the people of Ambazonia are not fighting by their power today. They're fighting with the total support of God because they fight for what is right. And they can do it with their heads held high. And that's why I keep telling people, why do you think that the rebel movements in the Central African Republic, who control 2/3 of the territory, they control everything to the gates of Bangui, the capital. The only parts that they do not control is the so-called highway that links Bangui to Cameroon and the road to the airport in Bangui. Everything else is controlled by the rebels. But you have not heard the United Nations. You have not heard the African Union. You have not heard the Commonwealth of Nations. You have not heard the United States say the government of Central African Republic should negotiate with those rebels without preconditions. They will not say it because there's no justification to go and negotiate with those rebels. There were rebels that formed the republic in the north of Mali called the Republic of Azawad. It was the size of France. They held that republic for over a year. There was never once any power, any institution that said, negotiate with those people without preconditions. Never. It's never going to happen. There's no place else in the world where an armed insurrection, armed rebels fighting a so-called recognized government have been told you are going to go to negotiations without preconditions. We have it happening in Southern Cameroon because the international community realizes the crime they committed against the people of Southern Cameroon. And so we must persist in what we do, and we must do so with dignity and with justice, which means we must pursue our case without trying to be as savage as the savages we fight, because we're better than that.
Of course, we're better than that. I like that. And we're more than that, as a matter of fact. We would not go down low. We would hold our heads high. Now, in another question that is coming up, what is a francophone or an anglophone? Aren't they all African? So, language, culture, French, spirituality. What is the difference? One brother, the other one is wearing the trousers, a pant called francophone, and the other one is wearing the one called anglophone, but they are in the same pant. So, I mean, this is a question coming from African spiritualists, and it's a diaspora that doesn't know these appellations. What can you just tell the audience?
Well, the first thing I would say is that, you know, there are no Anglophones and no Francophones. Otherwise, we will call Americans Anglophones. Mm-hmm. We will call Canadians Anglophones. But the reason they call Anglophones and they found Francophones is because it's convenient for the divisive game. It is convenient so they can lay out a certain segment of people against whom they should discriminate or against whom they should provide special status. Mm-hmm. So being a Francophone, just by name, gives you a right to a certain number of things in the Cameroons that an Anglophone, just by name, doesn't have a right to. So it was a convenient way to create a system that allowed people to distinguish themselves. So that distinction with respect to language is neither here nor there, because I am not Anglophone. I am Com.
Yes.
Okay, that's my language. You know, I have also heard that they call us Boyo. No, I'm not Boyo. I'm Com. Boyo is a mountain, is a hill in Com. They call the people of Nsot Bui. No, they are not Bui. It's a river. They're Nsot people, and that Nsot nation, the Com nation, those were the nations that existed before they were colonized. The Germans fought in all of these places. And so when you get to a southern Cameroon that respects itself, it will start by respecting the Nsot nation. It will start by respecting the Com nation. It will recognize that the Com nation exists in its own self with its possibilities and its legal system. It may be customary law, with its administration, with its territorial administration, with a system of laws that, yes, can be modernized to catch up with human rights, that can be modernized to catch up with equality between male and female. But that is the nation. When you hear of all this minute stuff, all of it is put in place because they want to deny the fact that the Banyangi people are themselves their nation. That is what is at play here. There's a backward nation. That's why the first thing they jumped at doing was to show up and say, no, we're not going to call this Fako. We're going to call it the Cameroon Mountain. We're going to call it Mount Cameroon. Because they don't want the Bakuri people to own it. I'm surprised they have not changed the name of Ibasamoto. That's why they showed up in Victoria and said, we're not going to call it Victoria. Because if we say Victoria, people are going to remember that this part of the country belonged to the English. So let's change it to something. Let's change it to Limbe. The only thing they forgot is that they did not do enough research to know that Limbe is the name of the German army leader who showed up in Victoria at the time. They would have known that it was also, Limbe is also colonial. But they're so anxious to use these names, whether it's linked to language or is linked to a specific area, to tie you down. That's why you can see some of the mistakes that are made in the Ambazonian Revolution, where you have people saying, you need to go to your local government area. No, I can be a citizen anywhere. I'm a citizen of Ambazonia, free to be and live anywhere. When you take the example of the United States, a person like Clinton grew up in Arkansas, became governor in Arkansas. He and the wife lived there. But the wife became senator in New York. Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. But he is a senator for Illinois, Chicago, which is where he's settled, which is where he's building his presidential library. That is the kind of nation we should build, where I can go to small support and settle and not be called, come no go. And not hear anyone get privileges because they are so-called son or daughter of the soil. That's the nation we're supposed to build. And if we build that nation, it will be true to the spiritual part, which is connecting what our spiritual brother was saying. It will connect to the same humanity. Because that same humanity asked me to recognize that the people of Biafra may deserve the same thing that I want. And that international law does not refuse them the right to have that same thing that I want, even if they belong inside Nigeria today. That I may be able to recognize that the people of the north of Cameroon may decide, we don't even want to belong to this system anymore, which has been privatized by the militia, the Fangbeti Bulu militia. They should have a right to that because it's our common humanity. People have to be able to decide to live their lives to the fullest. God himself provided you with free will, including the will to deny him. to turn your back on him, to embrace Satan or something else. Whatever you wanted. Who are these humans who have decided on the basis of geography, boundaries, language, name of country, that we are going to be limited in our creation by what they have decided? Who are they?
Who are they? Thank you for those that are saying this is a very great show. And yes, everyone is watching, particularly from the mainland and also particularly from the diaspora, and saying, absolutely, this is what we should be listening and learning every day. That you're so knowledgeable. Of course, I already said it, that we just added one. In the past, we say we added when His Excellency Magufuli left, and we say Magufilication of Africa. So we can be saying Bolification of Africa, the Africa that we want today. So it's really a huge and immense pleasure, not just pleasure, but respect to have this son here, actually an activist, but also a unique icon in terms of genuity. We talked about genius. Now, when we look into the communication sector, even like I said, when young, not too young, I'm not that too young, we heard names like, I'm saying, Boh Herbert, Kajon Defoe, Eric Chinje, Chris Ano, all these the sons that you could sit and you love to watch news. Now, do you sit again and look at back and say, there's something I want to watch from the CRTV?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
your past office?
I think CRTV became a joke a long time ago. We came out of school fired up for what we had learned, for the opportunity that was ahead of us. And CRTV was a platform that doesn't belong for those who want to get it and use it for their purposes, which is, kiss up to the regime so I can be made director general tomorrow, which is what some of our colleagues managed to do. I'm just going to be so quiet. They're going to know that I'm one of those guys who doesn't disturb, and they're going to promote me. No, that's not the job of a journalist. The job of the journalist is to hold up an uncomfortable mirror to society and ask society to look itself in that mirror. And to describe that society as accurately as the mirror shows, to the embarrassment of whoever, to the discomfort of whoever. It's not our business to worry about whether you like the description we are giving or you don't like it. And there's one principle that we were taught in journalism school. One was, you've got to survive to tell the story. So yes, I understand people have to determine a way in which they're going to be able to tell the story and still be alive. So from time to time, we beat and blow, but the basic principle was, when you are blowing, you're not lying. You're not kissing up. You're just doing a program that is less atakatua towards the regime. So for instance, we could go out and do a big program on how, how corrupt the Ministry of Trade was, or, how they went out and damned rice made in Cameroon in favor of imported rice. We could go out and do that. But we could follow that up by bringing home the problems of someone living with disabilities without support from the regime and trying to get their lives move along, hoping that that story could inspire other people living disabilities. So it was not about going to lie. So CRTV, by the time I was leaving in 1990, was a very simple thing. We had put in place a number of things. One was, we are told Francophones, and Eric Chinje provided great leadership. People like Akwanka Jondifo provided great leadership. And that's part of the reason why we were very disappointed. Because as soon as they realized that these elder ones were providing the kind of great leadership that we needed, and that they were leading us in the right direction, then the next thing we had was, they would make me political affairs editor. And my staff was supposed to be, Asong Lefang Kemleke Barnabas, whom I grew up admiring. Victor Epiengome, whom I grew up admiring. Those were the people they put in my staff. People who were teaching me the job. And we told them, why are you doing this? You don't do it to Francophones. The Shandongos are patrons. Why are you not making Shalatangana the patron of Shandongo? But you're making me the patron of Akwanka Jondifo. And that's part of the reason why a guy like Ntumfoyn Figure and myself rejected positions that they gave us and walked away. We said, we're not going to do that. This is not how it's supposed to work. Now, ultimately, CRTV decided that the only reason it existed, Francophone part of CRTV, of course, that the only reason it existed was to sing praises to BI and the highest. And so they spent their whole time doing that. And it was not because they were not aware of what we were doing, because the English language news existed in the same newsroom with the French language news. We went down to studio and we produced a completely different bulletin from what they produced, which was always kissing up. And so even that process of putting the two systems together was part of the assimilation. Because if you truly want to communicate, you will not set up a program in which people can switch from one to the other language. Meanwhile, your audience understands one language. There's all of those bilingual news editions that they put out was for the purposes of blindsiding one part of the country. So they could send different kinds of signals to their Francophone brothers, which they sent as soon as we started the Amazonian restoration. Francophone media could go out as they're going out today, and they could say, go and massacre all of them. All of these guys are terrorists, they're secessionists. And they're saying it in French. So our people don't hear anything. It's exactly the same thing they did with the Interamwe. They sat together, the militia was of the same groups, the same tribes. They rolled out their own messages and they called the others cockroaches and they said, go out and crush them. So CRTV has helped in its own way to become Radio Mille Collines, to be the perpetrator of this genocide to the extent that it is the one that's rolling out the propaganda. You can see bold editorials by other Francophones. One of them aired this week in which they called Mr. Biya le roi feignant. That was a very kind attribute because Mr. Biya is more than a roi feignant. But the truth is, one of those examples, they barely ever make it to the official media. And the official media has been created for that purpose. It's one of the things we must avoid in Amazonia. Here in the United States, you don't have an official media. And that's how democracies are supposed to work. Let people, like Dr. Susan Tafa, run the media, provide news to people without fear or favor. I mean, it turns out in the US that you've got the same system, of course, because if you look at Fox News, it's all working along the same lines. Because Fox News has eternally told people, coronavirus does not exist. You don't need a vaccine. You don't need masks. There are close to 700,000 people killed right now. That's what Radio Mille Collines did in Rwanda. They told people you can go out and kill. Here they're saying you can just leave your mask off. You can just don't take the vaccine, just die. And when they put Radio Mille Collines on trial for perpetrating the genocide, maybe they should put Fox News on trial as well, because their crime is no small. But CRTV is militantly advocating on behalf of a genocidal system. They are militantly justifying why the massacres deserve to be perpetrated. They are on a daily basis singing praise to the regime that is perpetrating those crimes. And all of those people deserve to be dragged before a court to explain how it is that you can justify that.
Wow. I want to take you over a little bit because you're so rich in this. I would have been opening up the lines now. I mean, we have 30 minutes to go, so we really have serious good time and we're really enjoying this. Thank you. I think you want to drink a sip of water. I want to thank all of you that are watching, thousands in your numbers. And if you're here for the first time, the Pan-African Daily TV is the voices of the Africans worldwide for unity of mainland and diaspora, connecting us as a one Africa, one people. And so we talk about expertise conversation. We're not an entertaining media, you know it. We are not just here to be another live stream media where we need thousands of followers, even though we have followed millions worldwide. But the main core importance of the Pan-African Daily is Africans seeking for solutions to their own challenges that we didn't even cause in any case. But now the African perspective, like that mirror that our brother Boh is saying, is Africans holding this mirror to Africans themselves and say, what do you see? And how are we going to see it? Africans holding the mirror and saying, how do you see China? How do you see Germany? How do you see UK? It is Africa telling the world from an African perspective what Africa is and what the world thinks Africa is. That is basically what the Pan-African Daily TV is all about. And you can see as we're running the 1 million subscriber campaign, we are also bringing together this kind of iconic brains that will help us to build this media to represent the voices of the Africans. It's not only about scholars, it's any African, because we believe all Africans have the genuity and they have the purpose. Of course, we're spiritual. Every African has a story and a great story, of course. So if I take you over to the Caribbean and we see in this lovely queen, I don't know, you heard her in the United Nations. I love her so much. Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados. And when she opened her session and referred to, you know, bringing up Bob Marley and Peter Tosh on this Get Up, Stand Up. I mean, it was like, you know, it's the new Africa that is just developing when Robert Nesta Marley talked about Africa, Get Up, Stand Up. Now, when we relate that now to the upcoming and the new Africa that we want, the Africa of, I mean, brought to the world by Africans themselves. How do you want to put that into a way forward into all what we're talking about? Get up, stand up. For what?
First, I will say, you know, you never get anything wrong with Bob Marley. You know, pick your song, and he's right. It's like with Fela Ransom Kuti. Pick your song, the guy is right. You know, they lived so many generations ahead of their time, and they fired up our world the way it's going to be impossible to fire it up ever, because these people provided inspiration for hundreds of years to come. It's like I started by mentioning a song at the beginning of the program when I talked about this song that was written in 1971 by a young American who in 1961 was one of the first blacks to be integrated into the the newly desegregated school system in Tennessee. He wrote this in his dorm when he was in Philadelphia, when he said, the revolution is not going to be televised, because he was basically saying, hey, this is about empowering you. This is about putting you in the driver's seat. This is about asking you to get up, stand up. He didn't use the words of Bob Marley, but that's where they were going with all of these lyrics. Get up, stand up, go forward, and move your country forward. So that's so I was really delighted with the leader of Barbados, and I think the big thing on Twitter that really sold her to the world was a Twitter thread that said, the world has got a new leader.
Yes.
And so it's not just about Barbados. It's the world is hungry for the new Martin Luther King, for the new
Yes.
Susan Parks. That's why the world so gravitated around the loss of George Floyd, because he symbolized the downtrodden, mistreated in the worst way possible, dead on camera, in total indifference to those who were torturing them to death. That's the power of all of that. Now, so we found the bottom tortured to death leaders, but here at the United Nations podium, you could find a new leader for the world, going back to the lyrics of the masters of reggae to say, hey, come on now, let's get up and stand up and go do this. It is a big moment for Africa and for Africans across the globe.
Yes.
Because there is nothing like, to go back to Christ, there's nothing that divides and destroys a house like division within. And Africa finds itself in a setting where the world has organized for Africans to be divided amongst themselves. It's so endemic that when you show up as a newly arrived African immigrant in the United States, they almost encourage you to look down on those who are descendants of the slaves, because they didn't get an opportunity to get the education that we got, because somehow they are not connected to the culture. Yes, but that's what 900 years of slavery did. 900 years of slavery turned them from Kunta Kinte to Toby. It took culture out of them. It took spirituality out of them. It took the moral compass out of them. Because when someone is left with nothing else than to try to survive, then they do things that animals do to survive. You eat other species to survive. That's where they drove our people to. And once they got them to that place, then they put on a drug that was called dependence, which is called social programs, because the only other thing they offered them was slave wages in underpaid work that provided little to no security, no social programs, no insurance, no retirements. So they had to work themselves to death the same way they worked themselves to death under slavery. And then, in the midst of that, they made sure that they loaded up their neighborhoods with drugs. So when you have been doing hard labor for a long time, as they've now found out in the medicinal value of marijuana, they loaded up that neighborhood with marijuana, with drug dealers. And then when you smoke that stuff, then they put you away in jail for a long, long, long time. Meanwhile, rich people who had vast expanse of gardens could go out and smoke the stuff in their gardens looking into the woods. And not a single policeman will be coming by, so no one of them would go to jail. And even if they got arrested, they got a pat on the back. They got a pat on the wrist. Meanwhile, the black guy was thrown in jail for a long time. And so successfully, they have created this system where, you know, the black guy who survived Arab slavery in Libya, in Algeria, in Egypt, is still a subhuman today. They have created a system where in Niger, in Mauritania, people still believe that the Arab Africans and descendants of Africans have a certain right to enslave the blacks, which was part of what we had with Sudan and South Sudan. It is just a system that's in place. We've had that with the Arab Shuas in the north of Cameroon and in Chad. So it's a system that's in place, and you can see it in the Fulani fights in Nigeria, with Igbo land, with grazing conflicts, because a certain part of the Arab world says to themselves, we are superior to these guys. And it's true. that they overran us in slavery. Because if we believe our history and believe the Bible, and one of the kings that came to see Jesus at his birth was coming out of Saudi Arabia, and it was a black king, so it was a black kingdom. So all of this Arab world that wiped us out from the north of Africa and established an Arab empire up in the north of Africa, that was part of the absolute, let's take them out. And so today you have huge populations of black people in a place like Brazil who have no connections to Africa, who hardly go back. When you see them go back, when you see a guy, a star like there's an American star who is on TV, I'm just forgetting his name now, he's also a comedian. But when he goes to a place, the Almina Castle in Ghana, and he can feel, sorry, Steve Harvey. So when Steve Harvey goes to the Almina Castle in Ghana, he can say to himself, my goodness, this is where I came through. I did not physically, but my grandparents came through this. This is the abuse to which we were subjugated. And so he can reconnect. But in a place like Ghana, they have established programs, including what they call the program of return, where they have baptisms for African Americans who return to Ghana and want to rejoin the continent. So they go with them out to sea and allow them to walk back to the shores of Ghana, where they take on a Ghanaian name, Nkwame here, Kofi there, and all that. And they accept that they have come back to the continent. And they're investing big time in places like Ghana, where people have recognized that we need to create that connection. But you have people who've worked a lot trying to push those programs in place, like the Cameroons, people like Eric Chinje, who move people who had identified their DNA, traced it back to the Cameroons. You have them go back all the way and they would stay a night at the Hilton Hotel. And the only interest of the Biya regime is how to bribe them. You know, how much did you bring? How much are you giving me? They are not seeing any connection with these people. When someone like Representative Karen Bass traces her origins back to Cameroon, when someone like Oprah Winfrey, who had initially thought that because she was Bantu, she was from South Africa, when she traces her origins back to Cameroon, to her Bamileke roots, they have no interest. The one person they showed interest in recently was Spike Lee, the filmmaker, because he traced his origins back to there. But they are not interested in creating this community of Africans supporting each other. We are not ready yet with the leaders that we have, if we can call them leaders, dignify them by calling them leaders. We are not ready yet to have a communion of the African people. And that communion will begin by saying, they did us wrong, they owe us an apology, and they need to make us whole again. Those issues of reparations are all here. And no matter how long they stretch them out, you know, luckily places like Germany are jumping up and saying, oh, you know, Namibia, we admit that this was horrible, this was a genocide, and we need to do something about it. Hopefully more countries join in that admission that Germany has made in more than one place and say, we did you wrong and we need to make you whole.
I still look forward to see a Germany that stands up and say, we were part of Southern Cameroons, like all this railway station. We had the technical or the vocational trainings that are actually one of the most recognized system of skills, a combined skills of theory and practical educational system, the only in the world, which is what we're actually trying to aid to bridge the diaspora through skills transfer and exchange. I mean, those that would want to stay geographically. But I would actually never shower Germany, because that what they did on Namibia is a shame. And we need to call it by that name. Of course, yes, I understand from that view of that particular thing that they tried, but it is just still like we are mobilizing, and the parliamentarians sitting in Germany here. It was not only in Namibia. When we even go back, we will have a conversation on that later, on Berlin 1884, which was not even the partition of Africa, it was the treaty, the Congo Treaty, that brought them to that table. So this particular southern Cameroon, Amazonia that you're talking about, where Germans actually know this history and participated, but have never said a word. Just give me one word for Germany.
Well, you know, some countries are so ashamed of their history that they don't want to talk about it, which is what embarrasses the United States the most and probably embarrasses Germany the most. It's just the fear of looking in the mirror, because the monster staring out at them just frightens them. And so they can't tell the rest of the world who they are seeing. And that's part of the trouble. And, you know, this, when you talk about Namibia, I say, yes, I agree with you. It was a tiny little thing that didn't amount to much. But it was looking at the face of that monster and saying, you know, I am so ugly, I can't even describe it. But, you know, I recognize that my ear is so ugly. So I would admit the ear, but I'm not talking about the eyes and the face yet. We are hoping that Germany gets to that place, because we don't need another Nuremberg. But if they're waiting for it, we will give them another Nuremberg. There will be a trial of this world organized by Africans to put all of these people on trial. If they don't believe it, they should think about where China was only 20 years ago. China was a third world country, limping along, begging from the crumbs of the West. It is no longer that. It is the second most powerful superpower in the world right now. And China is nothing compared to Africa.
Correct.
Because when Africa comes of age, everyone is going to want to move. All of us are going to have to sit down and determine, you know, whether we should do exactly what the US is doing to Haitians right now, packing them on planes and moving them back to Haiti, when the Americans decide that we need to come to Southern Cameroons, because that's where we got jobs now. That's where we can build roads today. That's where, you know, if you're making vehicles, that's where they have to go to. Because that time is coming. It's not far away. If any CEO sits in a corporation today and they don't have an African policy, they are leading a corporation that's going down the tubes. It's going to die, because the market of tomorrow belongs to Africa. As a matter of fact, because it is tomorrow, today belongs to Africa. Because you have to plan today to conquer tomorrow. And whether they accept it or not, it is inevitable. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen in our time, exactly the same way China happened in their time.
Ashe. I dove my heart again for you. Exactly. Whether they like it or not, it is the decade of the African, the continent that was already created to save the world. And even though has been raped, right, it's gonna be again as decreed by the creator. So it's the same thing. I keep telling them, I'm so sorry for you. It's a kind of like, you know, trying to even survive, you to say, please make it right as soon as possible, because it's unstoppable. There's nothing that will stop it. So I want to thank you very, very much. As you can see, my jaws was just wide as you were saying that Africa, mother of the world, the birthplace of humanity, it is the time. But this Africa is not the one that would be defined by anybody else, but by Africans doing it for themselves, for Africa. I want to thank you. I know we would be having you so much here because you're very important, and I can't really wait. One last question from my part, and I would open up the lines probably if someone wants to have a question to ask directly. But if not, absolutely, it was right for us to just sit first, feel Boh sitting right here. I like it when I call him like that, even though I'm not in that position to kind of, it's a connection. I feel like I belong to him. As I call him Boh. And that's how they used to call him. I used to hear his colleagues when they were in the newsroom, right? And so it was not only the sexiness, the romance in this, but you could see it. You could see the Black King sitting there and saying, so it shall be, so it was, and so it is right now. So I really want to thank you. And I know, but one last thing that I'm saying, 1st of October isn't Friday. Coincidentally, 1st of October is also the unification of Germany, and they're also celebrating. And as you know, Germany is also just 30 years old. I mean, 10 years older than China. And we know their past so well, and so well that we are optimistic that if Germany, taking its history of how America, Russia, France tore them apart, just like what they did to us, and that in 30 years now, Germany had a physical war. It's not even our own geographical boundaries that are in our minds. We don't have those walls leaving southern Cameroons to Nigeria that you see physically. We have rivers that you have to cross, and it's walkable. We can even swim, right? We can use our canoes, and we can use our horsebacks. We can use our camels. But we're talking about a physical war, like the one that Mr. Strong wanted to build between, the Americas, and we saw it. And it's just 30 years. And now it's one also the powerful nation in Europe. Does that give us the audacity as Africans to believe in ourselves, to know that what we are saying today, even if we're young, it also took them a while to get here. 1st of October, the independence of Southern Cameroon and Amazonia is going to be celebrated worldwide. The headquarters and the organizers of that is coming up again live. So we have a lot to learn. But even after this broadcast that we're producing now, we're also going to listen. That's going to be a rebroadcast from Abdul Karim, who is coming up live again tomorrow, and he actually explained the historical part and political part, what is happening or what happened in Amazonia that is still happening today. So I would also invite some of you who are hearing it for the first time, and probably which Boh did not go into that because Abdul is going to work on that topic tomorrow, to watch this rebroadcast. But Abdul Karim is going to be with us live, and a whole team. Dr. Jimambo is going to be with us. Nda Ferdinand is going to be with us. And one powerful queen that you already know, Eleanor, is going to be with us. Angui is going to be with us. And so, a handful, all of them are going to be sitting here again to just share that momentum with you. What is this supposed to mean? It is for the whole of Africa. When we use a case study of lioness, the Amazons that we know today also come from Amazonia, and they were the first warriors to liberate Africa out of slavery, and they came from Southern Cameroons. And you guess what? They were women, not even kings, right? And so the uprising is not starting today. As we say, it's a spiritual connection. I'm just wanting to invite you again tomorrow for this wonderful session. And then on Friday, of course, we're going to have Dr. Cooper, is Diaspora with knowledge. So in fact, he's also going to be like Boh, is one of our first time guests that we've been running after for years. And he's just joined our expertise, honorable guest list, just like Boh has done. Then on Saturday, I also told you about Dr. Elaine. Dr. Elaine is one of the powerful ones, just like Boh, also a journalist on all major platforms, whether it's the NBC or the ABC News that we all know about. And she's really focused on spiritual and holistic nature of the African. And that we have to go back to this ancient power to tap into a root so as to be able to devour whoever calls himself enemies of Africa. So I'm calling on you all to join us again tomorrow, join us on Friday, and of course, join us on Saturday on the Pan African Daily TV. So, one more word for the king before we leave. Is it a coincidence? 1st of October, Germany's independence, 1st of October, the independence of South Africa. But of course, what lessons learned?
Yeah, Thank you very much again. It was my pleasure to be here. I'll just say for Germany, I had the pleasure of visiting in 1984. I came many times. I've visited many times, but the first time was in 1984, and the wall was up, and I had the opportunity to go through Checkpoint Charlie and to go into East Germany and to experience what slice of communism looked like, which essentially consisted of, in my case, as a student, changing 40 German marks on this side of the border and getting them to give me exactly 40 max on that side, which was not the exact equivalent, and money that we did not spend, which we just turned over to ladies who were cleaning the park where we stopped. But we were infuriated because that was a lot of money compared to a Cameroonian student visiting. But we had the pleasure of watching after Reagan called on Gorbachev tear down this wall, to see people take that wall piece by piece away, because no barriers can stand against a decided people. Yes. It doesn't matter whether you build those barriers in concrete, or you build them in spirituality, or you build them in an immorality, or you build them with violence. They are going to come down. A people will be united to themselves because they realize that their faith is uniting them together, which is what's going to happen to the people of Africa. The walls will melt on their own. They will melt because in this particular case, and you were right to point to the example of Donald Trump, who was trying to build a physical wall, which we don't need. But Europe has found out that even with a wall of water, an entire ocean between the continent and Earth, people are coming across by swimming. They get an any dinghy boat, they're going to try to make it because they have reduced the people of the continent to such a point where survival, including at any cost, has now become a way of pursuing life. And the people of Africa should congratulate themselves because, they say, including in the Bible, that you have to heat up the iron properly before you can work on it. Okay? So you need to go through this suffering because it builds your ingenuity. It creates your possibility to solve problems. It builds your patience in the face of difficulty. And it prepares you to weather tough times. Because whatever tough times they are throwing at you, you have seen worse times. So when you throw the tough times at people who have gone through slavery, have gone through colonialism, have gone through, forced labor and all that, it means nothing. These people are looking at it and they're saying, we've seen worse things. Well, this too will pass. That's what the people of Africa are saying right now. What leadership can do is to recognize that we must go by lips, that we cannot follow the progression that was the lot of the past world. And so there's technology, and we know that technology connects with young people faster than with the older generation. So there is, and Rwanda is showing this, there is a competitive advantage that we can have by getting young people introduced to technology early and giving them an opportunity to learn it. Because if you want to know how good they are at, throw your cell phone, newly bought cell phone that you don't know how to operate at your 2-year-old, and you'll be surprised what they're doing with it. So That's how good it is, and that's how we should make that leap. The second part is Africa has belittled its biggest force, which is their women and their girls. And they have relegated them to second role position. If Africa realizes this mistake and move women and girls up to positions of leadership, to the positions of queens and princesses that they are, the continent is going to leap forward. You can look at Rwanda again, another example of how lifting people into that position is so important. So I can hear people scream that the Taliban just formed a government in Afghanistan and it didn't have women, but I've not heard them scream when Mr. Biya has no women. I've not heard them scream when, Buhari has no women, or, other African governments. So it's important to create that equilibrium. The third part is to recognize that the world in which we live is a global world. And so it is around movements of people. It is no longer about the plantation agricultural economy. And so all these people who are telling us to return to the land, to work the plantations, to get back into the rubber factories and all of that, rubber plantations and banana plantations, and they're setting them up daily, they're not leading us anywhere. They're absolutely leading us to the grave. The economy is in the service sector. And that's why places like Kenya, relying on tourism, can survive so well, and places like, Mali, Central African Republic, that have developed no tourism industry, find themselves in such great difficulty. A last part is that this is a world that lives and thrives on financial. And financial means you need to get creative. We mentioned a moment ago about the issue of gold production and gold reserves, and how you use your resources, and how you realize that certain resources are not that good for you. So take oil, for instance. People find oil and they start jubilating. But at the same time as you're jubilating, once you start tapping that oil, you become poorer.
Correct.
But there is a different kind of system you can put in place. So you will have African countries debating whether we should get to a common currency. A common currency already exists. It's called plastic. It's called, Visa, MasterCard.
Agriculture.
So that's what it is. And so we can shortcut to there. When you have people able to do Momo, able to do mobile money, you stop telling us about common currency, because we are there already. It's how we leverage it right now. If the system in places in Africa were just to find out how they could get every one of us in the diaspora to build a home at home, just to take one example, or to build a business on the basis of a loan or some kind of, on a payment basis, you would have already created millions and millions and millions of jobs. Just being successful in doing that. But that connection, which today only allows us to feed people who, they want some food, that's not good enough. Why is it possible that I can go from the Cameroons and show up in the United States and, like a few months after, be able to walk to a bank and be able to get a loan, the equivalent of £1 billion francs CFA, to buy a home? Why am I credible here when I'm not credible in my own land? Mm-hmm. How are we going to grow this development in Africa if we continue to have the education curriculum that we have, where they teach us geography and history of other people? They teach us English and French as if it matters. I speak common, that's enough. Okay? So they don't teach me how to become an engineer, how to build an irrigation system that's going to grow food for my people, how to store that food, how to transform it, how to export it, how to make money out of it. They don't even teach us how to manage money. And they are hoping that we are going to get to development. No. And you're going to get to development by how? By going into a bank that gives you a loan at an interest rate of 35%, repayable in 2 years. What kind of factory gets established in 2 years and you can refund the loan in 2 years at the rate of 35% interest rate? That doesn't work. Those banks are not banks for development. Those are banks for asphyxiation of the people, for asphyxiation of the African economy. And all of these people know it. When you have a system set up like the World Bank, and the World Bank says to you that its private sector arm will provide loans not less than $1 million. Mm-hmm. You know exactly who they want to give $1 million to. They want to give it to the French, they want to give it to the English, because there's nobody in a small business in the Cameroons who's looking for a $1 million loan. So they're denying people $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 that will change their lives and change their communities, because they are looking for the $1 million, which they know don't benefit Africans and will never be given to Africans. Mm-hmm. So that system will collapse in the face of us establishing for ourselves a system that says we are going to be each other's keeper as we take the continent forward. But that we are ultimately, for those of us who are old, We are ultimately here stewards of this continent for a generation that's to come. And we need to create a foundation for that generation so that their lives are definitely better than our own. And that the challenges that we have faced and we have learned from, that we can create a way for them to be able to navigate those better and have a more fulfilling life than we have had. If we can do that, and we can connect with our diaspora, with our Black people across the world, if all of this comes together in one smooth chemistry, where when you have a war like, I don't know, in Amazonia, and we are looking to get money to refugees, all of us give a cent each, $1 each, and we are looking at billions and billions of dollars. They're going to stop all of this. If we, all of us, could turn around today and say, okay, 10,000 Haitians that were arrested a moment ago in the United States and are being deported to Haiti, we're going to give $1 each to make sure they can set up businesses. We've got Haiti settled. That can happen, but we've got to find that mobilizing mechanism, and we've got to find a way. I'm not saying that, you know, there's going to be a magic one, but we've got to think that way if we're going to get our people out of this place where they've been locked in for so many centuries.
Wonderful. Excellent. It couldn't be said much better. And you just concluded, because we're 3 minutes ahead and we started even 1 minute before time. So thank you so very much. Yes, we're coming up with this summit to talk about the biggest fundraising for Haiti and the way forward for our people in Haiti. And I would really be reaching out to you. Professor Baina Bello would also reach out to you, and also other comrades and voices out there. I just saw people signaling, Professor James Small and others saying, put us in contact with Boh. And yes, exactly. That was what this actually intended to. The great voices out there. Maponga is just signaling and say, who is this? Put us all together. Yeah, so we're gonna meet actually on the summit for Haiti. It's very, very important. Like you said, we take one country after the others, but we just want to actually globally wish the Southern Cameroons Amazonians a happy Independence Day on Friday. We will continue this session again tomorrow with that team out there. So we empower one after the other, but if of course it's for everybody, and we're inviting the whole wide world community to join this brave heart to say, yes, the right for self-determination. Yes, we are one country, but what if we live peacefully instead of killing each other, and we network? After all, we are one brother and the same continent and one sister. So I want to thank you so very much, dear brother, dear Boh. I have the privilege to call you like that, and we will be reaching out with you again very, very soon on this upcoming summit and other important discussions that would need your attention to the way forward for the Africa that we want. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So I think he just concluded, and there's nothing to say. Again, we're going to see ourselves tomorrow, same time, with this flyer dropping up. You already saw the crew that would be with us tomorrow. And it's all about, like we say, empowering, motivating, just like we do the situation in Rwanda and other countries. Tomorrow, we want to find out why is this people so determined to say yes. We were never even united, as a matter of fact, but we recognize the fact that we're Africans. But what if we define our values according to our traditions and the way we've been brought up, so that we live in peace with one another? Silencing of the gun 2020 could be just another sweet story, not just a fallacy. So we see us tomorrow, same time. Good night. Bye-bye. You are watching the Pan-African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tafa. The Africa we want: unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 hashtag 1 million subscribers on the Pan-African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa.